Chapter 1. Silence after the storm. The storm had passed, but the sky was still a dark, tormenting gaze. Snow lay thick outside the door, white and ghastly. Inside Monkswell Manor, everything had stopped moving, as if the house had just suffered a blow so powerful that time itself had stopped. Mollie Davis stood motionless in the corridor. Her eyes were fixed on the door that had swung open less than 10 minutes ago, through which Georgie, the impersonator of Inspector Trotter, had rushed in the chaos and disappeared into the snow. He had not been caught. He had not been stopped. No one had died. This time, she couldn't remember if she screamed or screamed. She only remembered the chill that ran down her spine as she realized that the mask he had worn the uniform, the hard voice, the seemingly honest eyes was all just the tip of a much larger nightmare. Giles, her husband, was fumbling to call the police. The phone was still dead. The line was cut. It was a small detail, but it was enough to plunge the house into a deafening silence. No one spoke. No one dared to look at each other for too long. Everyone knew Georgie could be back. "He can't be far," said Mollie, as if trying to convince herself. "We should find him." No one answered. Christopher Wren sat in his armchair, his hands shaking, his eyes wide as if they had not blinked since the revelation. Mrs. Boyle stood in the corner of the fireplace, still clutching the Bible she had not read. Major Metcalf took a step forward, then retreated. "I don't think he went alone," Metcalf said, his voice low. "I think there was someone in this house helping him." Mollie turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" The phone lines were cut before the snow fell, before he got here, he replied. And someone opened the back door, leaving an escape route. Mollie felt a lump in her throat. For a strange moment, her eyes met Giles's. He was looking at her, long and hard, as if she were a puzzle to be solved. Did you open the back door?" Giles asked. Simple question, but sharp as a knife. "No," she whispered. And you?" He did not answer immediately. "Upstairs?" Psst. A door suddenly slammed shut. Everyone was startled. Wind, or is someone still here? Chapter 2. The visitor with no past. The slam of the door echoed throughout Monkswell Manor like the blow of missed death. Giles rushed up the stairs first. Mollie followed, her heart hammering in her chest. Each step like walking on thin ice. The corridor upstairs was cold and dim, lit only by the flickering light of an oil lamp through the frosted windows. All the doors were closed, but someone had been there, or still was. "Room number 3, Giles said softly. His hand was on the knob. Then he turned to look at his wife. "Get ready." Mollie nodded. Her hand tightened on the iron rod she had taken from the coat rack downstairs. Giles pushed open the door. The room was empty. The bed was untouched. No breathing, no trace. But on the small wooden table, next to the window, there was a strange object. A handkerchief, white, with an embroidered letter S with a purple border. None of the guests' names begin with S. Mollie whispered, "No." Giles confirmed. "And no one carries this." They went back down to the ground floor, where expectant eyes were tearing at each other with suspicion. Christopher Wren stared at the handkerchief, I know it. He stammered. I saw it. Yesterday. In a man's hand. Who? Mollie asked quickly. Christopher hesitated. Then he said softly, the man standing outside the door, in the snow, wasn't Georgie. Someone else. He looked into the house. But then he left. And you didn't tell anyone. I thought I was imagining things. There were so many strange things. Metcalf stepped forward. Georgie didn't come here alone. He said again, clearly. He had a partner, probably someone who was in the house before the storm started. You mean? Giles looked around. A fake guest, or pretend to be the landlord, Metcalf said, looking straight at Mollie. The air thickened for a few seconds. Peter Sahaisen. Don't be ridiculous. Giles snapped. We've lived here since we were married. There's no way. Who are you subletting? From Metcalf interrupted. Mollie blinked. From a man named Paravicini? He only communicated by letter. Paravicini, Metcalf repeated. And he left no address. No, but he said he was abroad. Can't meet him in person. A voice came from the corner of the room. A voice that shouldn't have been there. But I'm still here, Paravicini said, stepping out from behind the curtain. All eyes turned. No one knew he was still in the house. No one saw him go upstairs. No one remembers checking his room. You thought I was gone? Paravicini chuckled. I am not one to be buried alive in snow. Mollie felt cold in her chest. It wasn't because of the weather, but because she realized there was another level to this house. A level of prearranged secrets. Chapter 3. Snow covers. Everything except lies outside. The wind howled like souls trapped in a frozen basement. Snow continued to fall. Thick white flakes covering every trace, as if to erase the past and the truth. In the living room, the light from the fire in the fireplace threw long shadows on the walls, shadows that moved when no one moved. Footsteps echoed from the empty hallway or from their own fraying imaginations. I thought you had left the house. Giles stared at Paravicini. You weren't in your room last night. Paravicini smiled faintly, his gaze piercing through the fabric, and polite. I like surprises. He said, one should never be predictable. Metcalf stepped closer, his voice low. Who are you? Really? Just a man who likes good tea, warm fireplaces, and houses with secrets. Paravicini replied. Enough, Mollie interrupted. She stood up, looking around at the guests. I don't know what's going on, but one of us could be the killer. Georgie or someone he works for is in this house, and I'm not about to let anyone else die. Very brave. Mrs. Davis, Metcalf said slowly, but the problem is, none of us know Georgie. He could be me, you, or even you. Giles turned around. Watch your words. I'm just stating possibilities. Metcalf smiled. What I don't believe in is coincidence. A house cut off by a storm. A murder a few days earlier. A warning letter. A child abandoned in an orphanage years ago. And Christopher Wren spoke in a trembling voice. What does that have to do with this? Metcalf looked straight at him. Georgie, as you know, was the third child in the abuse that year. The only one who disappeared, never to be adopted. He grew up in the dark, filled with hatred And now, the window burst open. A screech cut through the room like a knife. All turned. West window. The lock had been forced. Outside was a white space and a faint boot print in the snow, pointing in, not out. Giles rushed out, but his footsteps vanished after only a few meters. The snow had covered everything. Someone's gone out. Or just come in, he whispered. Paravicini smiled, walked over, bent down to the edge of the window, and pointed to a damp spot on the wooden floor. Water running from the shoes, that means the person came in from outside, he said evenly. And not too long ago. Molly felt her skin go cold. A voice spoke in her head, distant but clear. 3 blind mice. The melody came from the dining room. A clockwork. Automatic. But who wound it? Metcalf said softly. The game has begun. Chapter 4. Not everyone is a guest. The 3 blind mice still played in Molly's head like a childish curse twisted by time and resentment. She hurried to the dining room where the music had come from. But the room was empty. Not a soul in sight. Only the grandfather clock on the wall swayed gently, its dial indicating exactly 11 o'clock. Molly Giles's voice came from the corridor. What's the matter? The music is on again, she whispered, her eyes never leaving the clock. It could be a coincidence, Christopher said from behind, but his voice held no conviction. Metcalf approached the watch, examining it as if he were interrogating a witness. The mainspring is new. Someone must have triggered it on purpose. To remind us, or to threaten us, or to keep the beat. Paravicini interjected, his eyes sparkling like cracked crystal. A piece of music needs rhythm, and so does death. Molly trembled. She looked from one to the other. No one could be trusted, not her new husband, not even herself. She turned to Metcalf. You say you're a cop, but no one has ever verified that. Giles nodded. I wanted to ask that from the beginning. Metcalf did not respond. He slowly took a card from his inside pocket. It contained a badge and papers from Scotland Yard. Lieutenant Metcalf. Investigations into the Longridge farm case. I am here in response to a warning letter sent from this address. Signed, Maddox. So there is no one named Maddox here, Molly protested. It could have been a fake. It could have been someone trying to warn us, Metcalf said. But when I got there, the blizzard had trapped us, and I knew for sure. Georgie, who had lived in hatred, was with us. Paravicini grinned. I think people forget one thing. Georgie was just a kid, years ago. Who knows who he is now? Metcalf looked at Molly. There is a possibility I do not wish to mention. What is that? Georgie could be a person who changed her name. Someone who lived an ordinary life until the music played and old memories rose up like blood in the snow. A silence fell like a layer of snow covering the roof. And if that's true, Metcalf said slowly, the killer could be the man sitting right here, drinking tea, talking, and smiling. A scream tore through the air. Everyone turned around. Mrs. Boyle lay motionless on the stairs. Her neck was bent in an odd way. A red woolen string was still wrapped loosely around her neck like a child's noose. The melody of 3 blind mice rang out again. This time, not from the clock, but from the music box that was lying open on the shelf. Shut the door, Molly yelled. No one leaves this place. From now on, everyone is a suspect. Chapter 5. Blood does not dissolve in snow. The red yarn still dangled like a silent message from the dead. Mrs. Boyle, cranky, irritable, but still human, was now a cold corpse lying bent at the foot of the stairs, her face turned up as if she had not yet had time to scream. Metcalf leaned down, his eyes scanning the strangulation marks, the bruises, the edges of the rope marks. There was no struggle. She didn't scream for help. Whoever killed her was quick and professional. I just left the dining room, Giles said, sweat beading on his forehead. I just went upstairs to check on the wind-struck window. And I was in the living room, still talking to Paravicini. Mollie said, but her voice was tight. Something inside her was breaking. Christopher Wren leaned back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if there were the answer. A good play. There had to be another death. Right. 3 blind mice. One of them had his tail cut off. Damn it, Giles muttered. We need to hold it all here until reinforcements arrive. Metcalf stood up, walking slowly, as if he were pressing each word into the snow. No, Mr. Davis, this is no time to wait. The killer is among us, and he knows this place so well that he could kill in a minute and no one would hear. Paravicini tilted his head, his fingers touching his lips. I wonder, is this death really about the past, or is it a contrivance to close a bleeding wound? Agatha, what do you mean? Asked Mollie. Maybe Georgie didn't kill. He just guided. Maybe he sowed fear. But the killer was someone else. Someone who didn't look to the past, but was hiding from the present. Metcalf interrupted. We'll check your alibi. Every single one of you. Not just where you were at the time of the murder, but your story from the moment you got here. So let's start with you, Christopher said, his voice mocking. You say police, but who can prove it? Metcalf looked at him like a silent knife. I don't need to prove anything. I just need to bring a murderer to justice. And if I have to, I'll burn this house down to see him come to life. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded beast. So, Mollie trembled, looking at Giles. For the first time she saw in her husband's eyes not worry, but wariness, as if he were hiding something too. I need to catch my breath, she said, and turned toward the kitchen. Be careful, mistress, Paravicini called back softly. In this game of cat and mouse, no one knows who is the cat, and the mouse may not be blind anymore. The tune of 3 blind mice played again, softer this time, but more eerie. No one said anything else. There was only snow, and a house slowly cracking in the white cold. Chapter 6. The door is never locked. The kitchen was silent. There was no fire in the stove, no heat, only the ticking of the clock on the wall. Each ticking beat like a beat in Mollie's heart. She stood there, her hand shaking on the doorknob of the cellar where she had kept her gooseberry jam and her tablecloths, where no one had bothered to look, where something or someone might be hidden now. She pushed the door open. A blast of cold air hit her face. The wooden stairs leading down were dark. No light, no sound. She suddenly remembered she had locked the place this morning. But now the door was wide open. Behind her, footsteps sounded. Slow, quiet. She turned. It's Metcalf.
What are you looking for, Miss David.
I don't know. Something's not right. Someone's been in here. And you think he's hiding in the basement? Metcalf narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening on the small pistol. She nodded. Metcalf walked slowly down the stairs, the flashlight beam illuminating the damp walls. A draft from the air vent behind him made the light waver like a wandering spirit. At the bottom of the stairs, a piece of cloth. He bent down. Red wool, identical to the string around Mrs. Boyle's neck. He turned around. Mollie was gone. Mollie ran down the corridor as if possessed, not by fear, but by a presentiment as dark as the call of an owl at night. She pushed open the door to Christopher Wren's bedroom. In a flash, the room was like an oil painting in the dim light paper. Brushes, scribbles, and in the middle of the table, a tiny wooden mouse, its tail cut off. Below it is an unfinished poem. 3 mice ran through the snow. 1 fell. No one knew why. 1 hid in the shadows. The last one. Is the person reading this sentence? She stopped. From the door, the sound of creaking hinges. She turned back. The door was closing slowly. We can't hide anymore. Mrs. Davis, a voice whispered behind her. And I'm tired of the game. Meanwhile, in the basement, Metcalf followed small footprints in the dust, and he found a side door leading to the back of the villa. The lock was rusty, but recently broken. Someone is out, or waiting to re-enter. Mollie tried to keep her composure. Who are you? Who are you really? Christopher. Christopher stepped out of the shadows, holding a small knife in his hand, the same one that had been mentioned in the Longridge Farm children's case. Not Georgie, he whispered, but I know him. He is the shadow of the past, and I am the end of the lies. You killed Mrs. Boyle. He chuckled. Not yet, but I wrote her ending. As for the one who did it, I'm redrawing him in blood. Behind Christopher, a third shadow appeared. There was a third person, and this time, there was the sound of a trigger being cocked. And that night, the snow continued to fall. But in the Monkswell house, the shadows began to decay. A chain of truths is about to burst like a lock being undone. And the ending may not be for everyone. Chapter 7. The wind through the curtain. The wind howled outside the window like a muffled scream. Mollie stood motionless in the middle of the room. The door behind her was locked. Christopher Wren stood opposite her, a silver knife gleaming in his hand. His eyes as dull as a bottomless lake. But it wasn't him that made her tremble. It was the shadow behind him. The sound of a gun being loaded tore through the air. Metcalf. Enough, he said, his voice as cold as the night snow. Put down the knife, Wren. Christopher laughed. Do you think I'm a murderer, Inspector? Or do you just like to hit the nail on the head? Mollie drew back, her heart beating like a drum. Who killed Mrs. Boyle? Metcalf stepped forward. Not him. Christopher threw the knife down, his voice somber. I just wanted someone to see. I was the third child. Georgie was my friend in the camp. I remember him crying at night. Then one day, he disappeared. And what are you here for? Asked Mollie. Because I was left behind too. And because the person who killed Georgie is still alive. A chill ran down Mollie's spine. You mean? Metcalf nodded. There is a third person in this house. The living room was dark. Giles stood there, his coat covered in snow. His hands were covered in blood, not his own. Giles cried, "Molly, what is it?" He trembled. "Someone stabbed me in the hallway. I think it was Paravicini." "Where is he?" "Disappeared, like blended into the darkness." Metcalf stepped in. Paravicini was no accident. I had my doubts from the beginning. The language was too smooth. The appearance too perfect. "So, he's Georgie." "No. Georgie died years ago. But he was the one who buried the truth alive." Molly collapsed into a chair. The wind was still whistling through the cracks in the door. There was a soft tap on the window. Metcalf stepped forward and opened the curtains. A piece of paper stuck to the outside, written in red ink. The last man must be silent. Molly read aloud. Giles turned pale. Christopher stood up. I won't let him continue. Molly looked at them, 3 people. 3 different pasts. 3 unspoken secrets. And one of them still hadn't told the truth. Metcalf opened a map of the mansion. "There's one room we haven't checked yet." "Which room?" asked Molly. "Old storage room under the stairs. Wooden door. I saw the lock had been removed. From the inside. He might be there." Giles hissed. "I'll go with you," said Christopher. Metcalf nodded. "And you?" "Molly, don't leave the drawing room until I come back." Molly sat alone in the dark, her hands clasped together. Every click made her heart clench. Then a faint singing came from afar. 3 blind mice. "See how they run." Not from the radio, not from the hallway, but from right behind her. Chapter 8. Singing in the night. 3 blind mice. See how they run. The haunting singing still hummed, as if coming from within the walls, or from somewhere that wasn't there. Molly stiffened. Her hand touched the back of the chair, cold as steel. Every hair on the back of her neck stood up. She turned her head slowly. There was no one, just the old mirror behind, reflecting her face pale, distorted by the darkness. But then a shadow passed by the reflection. Molly spun around. It was empty. Down in the basement, Metcalf's flashlight beam swept across the gray walls. The old warehouse was stuffy and smelled of mold. The rusty iron door had been opened. Christopher followed, cautiously, his hands still shaking slightly. "Do you think he's hiding here?" he whispered. Metcalf nodded. "If I were a killer, I would choose a place where no one wants to go." Suddenly, a noise was heard at the end of the hallway, the sound of metal hitting brick. "Calme-toi," they charged, weapons ready. The door leading to the last storage room opened. Inside, there was only an old chair and a headless doll placed in the middle of the room. On the wall, written in black paint, "I see everything." Christopher stepped back, his face pale. "Oh my God." Metcalf looked up at the ceiling. An air vent just big enough for a person to squeeze through. "He's moving." Back in the living room, Molly closed all the curtains. Every dark corner was now a trap. She turned to the door when, "Don't be afraid," a voice whispered right behind her ear. She turned around. Paravicini, he stepped out from behind the cabinet, holding a small music box. His face was no longer humorous, no longer puzzled, only cold sobriety. "You are very brave." "Miss Davis," he said. But bravery saves no one. "Who are you?" Molly asked, her voice trembling. "The last person to see Georgie alive," he whispered, "and the last person to leave this house." Molly backed away. He chuckled. "You think you understand the past? No. They all, Giles, Wren, even Mrs. Boyle are hiding something. And I am just the mirror." Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Metcalf charged in, gun raised. "Put down the music box," he shouted. Paravicini turned back. "You are in time, Inspector." "But what are you in time for?" He threw the box to the ground. The music screeched and distorted. Giles appeared behind, panting. "Molly, stay back." Molly stepped aside. Metcalf pulled the trigger. No one won. Paravicini disappeared into the darkness, as if he had never existed. In the room, there was only the sound of the music box ringing out of rhythm. "We're hunting a ghost," Giles said softly. "No," Metcalf corrected. "We're being hunted by a ghost." Chapter 9. The Man in the Mirror. They searched all over Monkswell's house for him, the cellar, the attic, behind every old plaster wall, but Paravicini seemed to have vanished into thin air. Molly stood in the dining room, her hand shaking as she wiped the water from her unfinished teacup. Outside the window, the snow was still falling, thick and white. Each snowflake was like an eraser on the unfinished picture of the case. Wren suddenly walked in. "Miss Davis?" he said, his voice less chirpy than usual. "I think I remember him." Molly turned back, eyes full of doubt. "Missing who?" "Paravicini. He was in a reformatory up north. I was never sure. But the look in his eyes wasn't the look of someone who came here by chance." "Then why didn't you say so sooner?" Molly asked. Her voice strained. Wren pursed her lips. "Because I know you don't believe me." A loud bang came from upstairs. Deacon. Both were startled. Giles was standing in his bedroom, staring into the large mirror that hung on the wall. Something was wrong. The surface of the mirror foggy, as if there was a breath of air on the other side. Metcalf stepped in the back. "What do you see?" Giles asked. "It's not the mirror," said the inspector, his eyes sharp. "It's behind it." They lifted the mirror together. There was a dark gap, big enough for a person to crawl through. Metcalf shined his flashlight. Dust, cobwebs, and footprints. New. Giles looked at him. "That's the way. Maybe that's where he eavesdrops and kills people." In the living room, the music box began to play again. No one touched it. Wren stepped back, her voice breaking. It wasn't working before. Molly approached. The music box turned slowly, and underneath, where the tray was opened, there was a small object, an old photo. A little girl and a little boy. The girl was wearing a red dress. The boy was wearing a hospital uniform. Both their faces were scribbled in black marker, except for their eyes. The boy's eyes were wide, lifeless. "The photo says I miss you." Molly sat down. "Georgie," Wren frowned. "What?" She looked up, her eyes distant. "That boy I taught him once. That orphanage, Georgie didn't talk, but he always carried a music box with him." Metcalf returns. "We have a killer who knows every corner of this house," he said, "and he's playing a game of chess with the past." Giles stepped forward, placing his hand on his wife's shoulder. "We have to get out before he finishes his act." But just then, all the lights went out. Darkness fell like a cold blanket over every soul. In the darkness, a soft voice rang out. 3 blind mice. Then laughter. Cold, long, lost. Chapter 10. Confession in the snow. Darkness engulfed the house. There was no sound, only heavy breathing and the sound of someone's footsteps sliding silently across the wooden floor. Molly groped for Giles's hand in the darkness, but the air was cold. He was no longer there. A voice rang out from somewhere above the stairs. Iki da gitalia yaras emi saude askampatai. We've been here before, Molly. You just don't recognize me. She turned her head, her heart pounding. That voice, Georgie's. You were the last person to see me. But then you turned away. Molly tried to contain her panic. Georgie, I don't know. I don't understand. The voice chuckled. You forget so quickly, but I don't forget. In the basement. Metcalf groped to open an old wooden box he found behind a bookshelf. Inside were papers, files from the Long Ridge Farm Orphanage, 1939. A crumpled page, spattered with dried blood children. Georgina Corrigan, missing. William Paravicini, supervisor, suspended. He looked up, his eyes dark. That's right. Georgie isn't dead. He's just learned to hide. Upstairs. Giles's flashlight shone on a small open window. Snow was blowing in from outside, making the curtains flutter like white ghost wings. He heard the singing again. 3 blind mice, and then there was laughter, and then the sound of a door slamming behind him. He turned. Wren stood there, her face twisted. You don't believe me either, do you? Giles stepped back. What are you talking about? Nobody believes children. Nobody listens to them. They just lock them up, imprison them, erase their memories. Wren held up a small knife. But I didn't forget, and now they will all remember my name. Giles was silent. You are Georgie. Wren smiled. I was him. Now, I am what they left behind. Just then a gunshot rang out. The door opened. Molly rushed in and found Giles standing gasping for breath. And Wren slumped, the bullet through his shoulder. Metcalf stood behind, gun still smoking it. Enough, he said, eyes unblinking. We can end this here. But there is one more person who needs to pay. From the darkness, a trembling hand rose Paravicini. His face was now wrinkled, not with old age, but with fear. Don't, Amon. I was just following orders. I didn't know the boy survived. So, Metcalf stepped closer. You knew he was alive, and you kept it a secret until he came back and started killing. The next morning, the police arrived. The snow had stopped falling. A gray sky hung over Monkswell like a final warning. Molly looked out the window, seeing the blood smeared across the fresh snow. She held Giles' hand tightly. He is not a monster, she said. He is the result of wounds that no one bothered to heal. Metcalf stood by, thoughtful, and every living person bears some of the blame. They left in silence. Only the music box remained on the table. Turning silently, no music, just emptiness. Chapter 11. No one can wash the blood clean. Molly did not sleep that night. She sat in the cold kitchen, in front of a cold pot of tea, her eyes fixed on the flickering fire. Everyone had left. Wren was in a high-security psychiatric hospital. Paravicini, or rather Hoffman, had been expelled. Giles did not talk much anymore. Silence has a smell. The smell of old ashes, the smell of a fire that once burned. She placed her hand on the table where they had once eaten breakfast, where only a few days before the laughter of the lodgers had filled the air. Now it was only a relic of oblivion. In the sheriff's office, Trotter, no longer the inspector, was rewriting his final report. He was a spy, yes, but he was also only human. In the note, he drew a line. Wren was not born a killer. He was raised in solitude, silence, and betrayal. Trotter knew. He had been there. Giles stood in the courtyard, looking at the inn. He saw snow falling, but this time it was not beautiful. The snow covered everything like a shroud. Every trace was erased. He turned to the kitchen window, where Mollie still sat. Something had gone from her eyes. Faith, perhaps. Love. Maybe not, but innocence. Metcalf left an envelope before leaving Monkswell. It contained old letters, copies of birth certificates, reports from Longridge Farm, and a note. They didn't kill Georgie. They just left him long enough to turn into a killer himself. Below that line is another sentence, written in red ink. And if we don't learn from this story, there will be more Georgies. That night, Mollie finally got up and cleaned the kitchen. Every cup, every plate held a memory. She picked up the music box, about to throw it away, then stopped. Her hands shook. Then she opened it. No music, just a dry click. Almost, she exhaled. For the first time in days, she laughed a weak laugh, carried away by the night wind. Okay, she said softly. No more singing, no more mice. She placed the music box in the fire, watching it turn to cinders. Chapter 12. The Third Hand in the Mirror. 3 weeks later, a spring storm swept through the Berkshire countryside. The old roads were flooded. The phone at the Monkswell Inn was still not working. Everything was ominously quiet. Mollie found herself talking more to the figure in the mirror than to Giles. At first, she thought it was just a reflection. But then she realized mirrors have memories. They retain things she tries to forget. One time, when she was brushing her hair, her reflection was still looking at her, even though she had bowed her head. Giles was no longer the husband she had loved. He banged on the table at the sound of footsteps at night. He was irritable when the alarm clock rang at midnight. And for the first time, he locked his bedroom door when he went to sleep. Mollie, did you turn on the light in Wren's room last night? Or not? I saw lights, moving, like people walking. She did not answer. Another night, a stranger appeared at the door of the inn, a woman with a gaunt face and a damp, wide-brimmed hat. She carried an old leather briefcase and said she was a government-appointed psychiatrist sent to review Georgie Corrigan's file. The boy had been placed in a private orphanage, not a state one, she said, and there were strange gaps in the medical records. Giles did not believe it, but Mollie felt a cold shiver run down her spine. A few days later, Mollie found an old drawing behind the fireplace. Scribbles, a room, a woman, and a note written in a child's handwriting. She said no one would believe me, but I would tell. She hugged the picture, her heart pounding. Not from fear, but from the realization that the handwriting wasn't Georgie's. In the dark, while everyone slept, a small clock ran backwards. Footsteps were light, like a cat's. but not a cat's. A clack, 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 clack. Sound came from the attic, where there was only dust and cobwebs before. Giles climbed up with his flashlight. A box was hidden behind a rafter. He opened it. Inside were letters, all signed C. Corrigan, Georgie's sister. One of them wrote, "You are not the only one alive." Chapter 13. The fourth piece. Mollie couldn't sleep. She had seen the letter. She knew Giles was still hiding something. He didn't mention it. But from the moment he found the box in the attic, he changed wary, secretive, or afraid of himself. On a dreary afternoon, as the rain lashed against the windows like dead man's fingernails, Mollie traced the ink on the letter. The marks smeared like old tears. See, Corrigan, not Georgie. Georgie's sister. But Georgie was an abandoned child. No one ever spoke of a sister, or people have purposely forgotten. She brought the letter to the psychiatrist. The old woman with the opaque glasses and the voice like the wind whistling through the cracks. How many children do you believe survived that house? 1, 2, 3. And the ones who weren't recorded. Mollie felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. She remembered what Wren had muttered in the middle of the night. "You think she's dead? She never died." Who is Wren talking about? That night, Mollie sneaked up to the attic. Giles had locked it, but she had the key. Inside, in addition to the old box, she discovered another strange object, a broken child's necklace with black and white beads like cat's eyes. Underneath was engraved, Clarissa. Her heart clenched to Clarissa Corrigan. The name had never been spoken, but now her ghost was everywhere in mirrors, in the sound of light footsteps in the night. And in Giles's mind, Mollie went down to the kitchen. Giles was standing by the window, his hands shaking. "Do you know about Clarissa?" she asked. He did not look at her, just said softly, "Mollie, I saw her." "Where?" "In the woods. This morning. Standing still, looking at me. With eyes just like Georgie." That night, a scream came from Wren's room. The window was wide open. On the wet ground, there were small footprints, not those of an adult. The footprints of a living child, or one who never dies. Chapter 14. Blood Rememberation. The wind whistled through the corridor like a child's whining. Mollie huddled in her old shawl, listening to the sound of lonely footsteps on the second floor. Not Giles's, not a visitor's. The footsteps do not belong to the living. She followed the sound to the library. The lights were off. Mist drifted through the cracks in the door like a breath. On the oak table was a crumpled sheet of paper. She opened it. Clarissa Corrigan, missing in 1932. No body. No conclusion. The girl wasn't dead, or so anyone dared claim. In the same stack of papers was a psychological report from the orphanage. She exhibited aggressive behavior, imagined her friends were invisible, and resisted all forms of control. When isolated, she often repeated the phrase, "He killed my sister." Mollie felt a chill down her spine. Clarissa's sister was Georgie. But Georgie didn't die then. Who is he in the living room? Christopher Wren was drawing. On the paper was the face of a little girl, tangled hair, deep-set eyes, chapped lips. But the most terrifying thing was, she looked exactly like the image Mollie remembered as a child. "Who are you drawing?" asked Mollie. Wren sneered. "I didn't paint her. She painted me." He turned the paper over. On the back was a scrawl, as if written in a shaky hand. I remember. I have not forgiven. Outside, snow began to fall. Giles found a small object near the gate. An old, pearl-studded hair clip, the kind kids used to wear in the 1930s. None of the guests received it. And then Giles said, "We are no longer masters of this house." Mollie. Not since I opened the box in the attic. Mollie went back to her room. There was a doll on her pillow. No one admitted to leaving it there. On the doll's dress is embroidered the words, "CC. Clarissa Corrigan is still here." No one saw her, but all could feel her breath cold, close to their ears. Muttering in the night, "I'm still playing. Hide and seek. Who's hiding my sister?" Chapter 15. The Last Secret Keeper. The last person awake that night was Major Metcalf. He did not sleep. He did not read. He just sat motionless by the fire, staring into the embers as if they were telling a story that only he could understand. In the pocket of his thick coat, he held an old photograph. There were 3 people in it: a brown-haired girl, a middle-aged man with cold eyes, and a little girl with a dirty face. Handwritten on the back of the photo was Longview Camp, 1932. The corner of the photo is stamped "Revoked." Ren was still awake. He watched Major from the corner of the stairs, his eyes unreadable. "You know, don't you?" he said. "All this?" Major did not deny. The girl in Longview, she had a sister named Georgina. She wasn't missing. She was renamed, identified. A foster family, a new life. Ren's eyes lit up, searching. "That's Mollie Davis, isn't it?" Major remained silent. Mollie did not know why she had come to the pond at 4 o'clock in the morning. Her feet moved as if in a dream. The snow was falling heavily, and the water was frozen opaque, and on the ice was a red wax seal, the head of a mouse. 3 blind mice. Giles stepped out of the shadows. "I hear singing," he said, eyes unblinking. The nursery rhyme of the 3 blind mice. "Clarissa never left this place," Mollie whispered. "She just disappeared from the records." "Or rather," Giles said, "the record was altered by someone in the system." At that moment, Major Metcalf approached. The wind blew his coat open, revealing an old military uniform, underneath not British, but special military police. He held out a small, sealed, urgent file. The subject line: Operation Sparrow Handling of Child Witnesses with Psychological Trauma in the Farm. Clarissa testified, but her testimony was manipulated. The man in the photo was an officer. The abuser and Clarissa's sister witnessed it. Mollie gasped. Major said slowly, "You are Georgina Corrigan. You forget. People make you forget. But memories never sleep." Behind them, on the ice, stood the silhouette of a little girl, white dress, bare feet, unmarked by the snow. She turned her head back. Her mouth moved. "Now it's your turn." Chapter 16. The Survivor's Mask. Mollie stepped back when she saw the girl's silhouette on the ice. Her eyes were black and empty, like the night in a memory she never wanted to remember. "You promised me, Georgina." The child's voice came, like wind through the pines. "You wouldn't let them take me, but you did." Giles caught Mollie's hand. "There's no one there, dear," he said. "You're just remembering." You don't need to go back. But Molly did not move. That baby is why I built Monkswell Manor, she whispered. A safe place. A place with no locks, no prisons. But in the end, I brought my nightmare into the place I thought was the safest, in the living room. The lights flickered. Major Metcalf stood across from Wren. You're not the real Wren, he said. You've been using an assumed identity since 1947. Your real name is Leonard Bright. And you're the younger brother of one of the 3 kids in Longview. Wren smiled, not denying it. My brother was Jimmy. He hanged himself with a tablecloth. As punishment for lying, his voice suddenly became hard and distorted. He is only 6 years old. 6 years old? Metcalf did not move. He's dead, Wren whispered. And none of you are responsible. So I decided. If justice doesn't exist, I'll create it. Molly appeared in the doorway, holding the metal box she had found in the cellar that morning. Inside were the shredded remains of a Report Longview Camp internal review. Top secret? Wren saw the box, her eyes darkening. I know. Oh, Molly nodded. You are Georgina, and you have survived by forgetting. But I have survived by revenge. A car horn sounded outside. Headlights shone straight into the window. The police were coming. Wren turned, his gaze wild. We're all survivors, right? He looked at Major. But you're not. You're part of the system. Major Metcalf mused. I don't deny it, but I'm here tonight to end it. I don't carry a gun. I carry the truth. The door opened. Snow poured in with 2 officers, but everyone stood still for a moment. Wren stepped into the middle of the room, raising his hand. I killed someone. Yes, but I did not kill Clarissa. She died years ago. Silently, unremembered. I am but an echo of that death. Molly sank into a chair, bursting into tears. A soldier, a child, a sister, an avenger, all sat together in this icy house, waiting for the truth to knock on the door. Though she saw almost, she know. Chapter 17. Snow falls on those that remain. The wind whistled through the cracks in the door, hissing like a whisper from the past. The police had taken Wren away, but the air still smelled cold, of something unsaid. Molly sat by the fire, her hands wrapped in an old woolen shawl. Her eyes were unfocused, as if the fragments of memory, just put together, had cracked again. Giles poured her a cup of hot tea. You did well, he said. You are not the only one carrying the burden of the past. She shook her head. No one is innocent. Giles, we all saw it. We all heard it. But no one spoke. Silence fell over the room like a thick blanket. Major Metcalf had not left yet. He stood by the window, watching the snowflakes fall on the melting ice. Actually, you know, he said, I'm not just an old officer. I went to Longview, only once. I saw the silence there. I wrote a report, and then I was sent away. Molly looked up, her eyes like knives. And you let them, Metcalf nodded. Not because I don't care, because I'm weak. No one said anything, but in that look, Molly knew. He was not a bad guy. He was just a guy who refused to stand up. And maybe that was enough to be part of the crime. The police returned, this time with another message. We found Mrs. Boyle's body, hidden under the snow on the side of the house. No one killed her. She slipped trying to escape from a locked room. Giles clasped his hands. A stupid tragedy. No, whispered Molly. It is the justice of fate. That night. The remaining guests cleaned up in silence. Monkswell Manor was no longer a place of refuge. It was a place to bury secrets. Outside, snow covered the roof, as if the world were trying to cover up what it could not fix. Late at night, Molly held an old envelope, a letter that a child named Jimmy had written to his sister. The handwriting was simple and scrawlable. I want to go home. It's cold here. Molly burned it in the fireplace. The ashes flew up and dissolved into the air. We can't fix the past, she said, but we can prevent it from happening again. Giles took her hand. And you did it. Outside, the snow is still falling. Not to erase it, but to remind us that there are memories that will always be imprinted, no matter how hard we try to cover them with winter. Chapter 18. When the door is locked. Monkswell Manor closed for a week after the incident. No visitors, no laughter, just silence, thick and heavy as the last breath of an unspoken secret. But the secret never dies. It sleeps. And then it wakes. Molly sat alone in the kitchen. The morning paper lay on the table. The front page had a sketch of Wren. The headline simply, "The Lone Killer Avenger for Longview." She put the newspaper aside. The story was over. But her heart was not at peace, because Wren wasn't the only one from Longview. That night, an anonymous envelope was slipped through the door. The paper was damp. The handwriting slanted. They never investigated the fourth person. Mrs. Boyle is just the tip of the iceberg. Molly's spine went cold. She remembered Wren had mentioned 3 people, the boss and the supervisor. But what about the fourth person, a figure standing in the shadows, untried, unmasked, and maybe still alive? Chapter 19. The question no one asked. Giles didn't believe it. A blackmail. Someone who likes to play detective incognito. Molly didn't argue, but that night, she found all the old police files. She turned the pages. A caption made her stop. Substitute teacher, November 1940. Name not confirmed. No one talks about him. No one remembers him. But he was in Jimmy's class. She typed on the paper, "The one who teaches children to be quiet." The next morning, a man came to Monkswell Manor. Tweed coat, fedora, eyes as gray as ashes. His voice was low, but sharp as needle. "Is there a room available, Miss Davis?" Molly stood still. The name he had used, Davis, was her old name, before she had changed it to Trotter when they married. He shouldn't know that, but he knows. Chapter 20. The Silent Teacher. The man checked into room number 4. He didn't ask for dinner. He didn't ask when breakfast was. He only asked for one thing, that the door not be locked from the outside. Claustrophobia, he said. But his eyes told a different story. Not fear of space, but fear of control. Molly agreed. She was no longer the naive girl who ran the inn. She was a survivor, and an observant survivor. That night, the creaking sound came at 1:37 a.m. Molly got out of bed and walked barefoot down the hall. The wind came in through the cracks in the door. The fire was still burning, but the cold was in her bones. She came to room number 4. The door was ajar. Dim light leaked through the crack, and the sound, a deep, even voice, whispering as if lecturing. And if I tell, what will happen? Nothing, except my disappearance. She pushed the door. Room available. The bed had no marks on it. The window was open, but no one could climb out. Second floor, no gutter, no ladder. On the table was a piece of chalk, broken in two, and on the wall, written in chalk, "Class starts again." The next morning, the police came. She didn't report it. They came for another reason. The Longview guard was dead. A note was stuffed in his mouth. "You shouldn't teach children to forget. The old inspector, Trotter, is back, no longer an actor. Now, a real investigator." When he met Mollie, he simply said, "It seems Longview never closes." "No," replied Mollie. "It just changed its address." Chapter 21. The Nameless Teacher. Trotter returned to the inn like a man carrying a cold in his pocket. His eyes scanned every crack in the wall, every dark spot where the light did not reach. He had stood here before, but this time, everything was different. He no longer kills with ropes or knives. He kills with fear, planting it like a seed in the memories of his victims. "Someone is training them," Trotter said. "Not to kill them, just to feel watched, night after night, until they can't sleep." "Who do you think it is?" Mollie asked hoarsely. Trotter pulled out an old, yellowed photograph. 7 children standing in a row, their eyes blank. A man behind them, tall and thin, had his hand on each of their shoulders. His face was obscured by the light, but his silhouette was clear. The intern teacher at Longview disappeared the same year the camp closed. He said, "No one remembers his name. Records were wiped clean. It's like he never existed. So why is he back now? Maybe," Trotter hesitated, "he never left. Maybe he just planted another classroom." That evening, room number 4 had a new guest, a girl with dark hair. She didn't ask about the price. She just said, "I went to Longview. I need to know what I'm remembering wrong." On her wrist, there was a scar around it like a rope. Mollie handed over the key without asking any questions. But as she turned away, she noticed chalk dust under her fingernails. 2:14 a.m. Trotter received the message. "Class starts at 3 o'clock. If you don't come, the lesson will go to another student." Message sent from the hostel's extension number. Trotter rushed in, but when he got there, room number 4 was empty. There was only a blackboard in the middle of the room, and a line of words written in crooked chalk. "The master does not forget, and the student is never forgiven." Chapter 22. The Memories Writer. Trotter stood in front of the blackboard. He reached out and touched the white chalk. The chalk fell into his hand like dust. "I do not forget, and you will never be forgiven." It was not a threat. It was a declaration. "This isn't just a murder," Trotter told Mollie. "This is a planned lesson." Mollie was silent, but her eyes no longer trembled. She said softly, "I was one of those children, Mr. Trotter, in Longview." Trotter turned back, his voice hoarse, like a stone grinding iron. "What do you remember?" Mollie chuckled. "Not much. Just, I was made to sit in a locker for 7 hours for dropping a book. He called it silent discipline. I'll never forget the ticking of the clock in there. It was like Like a memory rewriting machine, they decided to return to where they started, Longview Reformatory. Now, just a pile of collapsed bricks north of the swamp. But as he entered the old administration building, Trotter saw a wooden sign lying on the side of the hallway, which read, Project Truth, Recall Experiment 731, funded by the Department of the Interior, top secret. Another line scrawled in red ink, Nobody remembers wrongly. They are just taught not to remember correctly. Trotter glanced at Mollie. This is no longer about personal history. This is the manipulation of collective memory. In the archives room, they found a file that had not been burned. Inside was a list of teachers in training, but only one person. No photo, no address, just the words, name, Charles D. Line, role, behavioral observation. Note, do not allow more than 10 minutes of contact with a child who appears mute. Trotter muttered, Charles D. Dickens Darwin. Or Delphi. Mollie shuddered. No, Delphi is not a name. It is a code name. The master does not teach letters. He teaches divination. He makes children into mirrors of the future he wants to see. It was dark when they left the camp, but Trotter had a flat tire. He bent down to change it when he heard a familiar voice behind him. I have taught you how to forget. Now it is time to learn to remember. Painfully, Trotter straightened up. But the gun was no longer in its holster, and Mollie was gone. Chapter 23. The Best Student. Trotter stepped back, slowly, but his eyes never left the man before him. He was taller than he had expected. There was nothing intimidating about his figure, an old wool coat, a gray felt hat, eyes that sparkled with intelligence behind round glasses. But it was his calmness that made Trotter's blood run cold. Delphi, Trotter whispered. The man nodded as if he were reading the name from an old book. You remember. Good. Memory is the foundation of all choice. Isn't it? Nigel, Trotter frowned. My name is Trotter. Delphi laughed. No, it was an act. Your real name is Nigel Lacey, and you were the smartest kid I ever had. You know why you did better than everyone else, because you never asked why. You just did it. Trotter took another step back. You're lying. Really? Delphi pulled an old, heavily creased photograph from her pocket. It showed a blonde child in a gray Longview uniform standing before a blackboard. The writing on the board was blurry, but the child's face, a blank. Obedient gaze was as clear as day. Your mother committed suicide 2 months after leaving Longview. Delphi said evenly, your father moved around to forget, and you were admitted to the special program. We taught you how to lie without blinking, how to investigate without leaving a trace, and most importantly, how to deal with the truth by twisting it. Trotter clenched his fists. I'm not that kid anymore. No. You are the man the program made you. Delphi stepped forward, slowly. And if you want to save Miss Mollie, you must remember the last thing you did in Longview. Where is she? Delphi looked up at the night sky. In the place we were all afraid to return to. In the white room. The room with no mirrors, no light. Only the sound of you singing lullabies to soothe the children who cried because they knew they would be erased. A sharp pain shot through Trotter's head. Blurry images came back, the sound of running water, a gloved hand on his shoulder. A little boy named Robbie who never returned from the White Room. And he, little Nigel, had signed that Robbie was transferred. Oh, there is no move. Only delete. Trotter fell to his knees on the pavement. Delphi placed the photo in his hands and whispered, "You don't need to believe me. You just need to remember yourself." And then he disappeared into the darkness. Trotter sat in the night, the wind howling through the trees, and his fragmented memories slowly pieced together the truth. He was not just an investigator. He was a machine that had created disappearances. Chapter 24. The White Room. As Trotter pushed open the heavy wooden door, the hinges creaked like the last gasp of a memory. The White Room, which he had thought was a vision of a 20-year sleepwalking, appeared before him. Unchanged, scary clean. White walls, white ceiling, a wooden chair in the middle of the room, a figure slumped over. Mollie. She raised her head, her face pale, her eyes dull, but she still recognized him. Nigel? Or Trotter? Her voice was shaky but sarcastic. What should I call you? He moved closer, took off his coat, and draped it over her shoulders. I came to take you out. Out, she chuckled. I used to take the kids out, but it turns out I just bring them back in. This room is a loop. Trotter sat down beside him, trying to keep his voice steady. Delphi told me about Longview, about things I had forgotten. Mollie was silent. And you believe him? No. He looked into her eyes. I believe the memories came back. There was a long silence. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the digital clock in the wall, a sound Trotter remembered well. It was the memory-erasing timer. Mollie, we have to destroy that device. Not just for you, for everyone who has been erased. It's not that easy, she whispered. This system has your own biometric security. You were the one who operated it. He frowned. If it were me, I would have to have a way to shut it off. There needs to be an emergency code. Mollie pointed to the watch. The emergency code is in the lullaby you used to sing. Do you remember? Trotter closed his eyes. A melody echoed lost among the broken pieces of his mind. Hush now. Quiet. No need to cry. The walls are white. The sky's a lie. Sleep comes fast to those who fade. Names are dreams that never stay, Saul. His pupils dilated. His hands shook. He walked to the wall console. He typed in each letter fade. The electric whine. The room shuddered. Then, click, the entire system shut down. No more cameras. No more artificial light. Just the first rays of sunlight filtering through the dusty cracks in the window. Mollie looked up at him for the first time without doubt, without fear. You just did something no one has ever done before, Nigel. Trotter bowed his head. His voice choked. I used to be the one who erased names. Now, I will be the one who writes them. Chapter 25. Profiles of the Erased. A week after the Longview system was disabled, Trotter and Mollie stood in the underground vault that had been the heart of the National Memory Control Network. Before them was Archive Room 17, where the files of the erased were kept. Are we sure we want to open this? Mollie looked at him, her eyes worried. If there was ever a place that contained the truth, this would be the first place the government would destroy. Trotter didn't answer. He held his old ID up to the scanner. The screen flashed. Then the words, identity confirmed. Nigel Trotter, Administrator LV01. You were the chief administrator of this entire facility, Mollie whispered. Zakari. Trotter nodded slowly. I thought I was just a normal investigator. But in fact, I was the one who created that mask to hide my true role. The door opened, cold, silent, and filled with stacks of files sealed redacted, names erased from history, lives no one remembers. He pulled out a file. Name, Eleanor Mayfield, occupation, investigative reporter, status deleted due to unauthorized access to Longview data in 2011. Final note. Memory transfer experiment. Failed. Now stored as a sub-personality in pattern C. Trotter swallowed. Alternate personality. How? Mollie grabbed the next file. Name Declan Wynne. Former opposition MP. And another. And another. All opponents of the memory control program. Trotter, this isn't a place to erase criminals' memories. This is a place to erase people's memories who know too much. Mollie's voice was hard and cold. We didn't destroy an organization, Trotter whispered. We just touched the core of a deep state. A beep sounded from the screen behind. A warning message appeared. Access not authorized. Emergency data recovery protocol is disabled. Supervisor will arrive in 42 minutes. Trotter turned back, his eyes lighting up, as if he were remembering his name for the first time. We don't have 42 minutes. We have a choice: either dig deeper and publish everything here, or disappear like them. Mollie looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. This time, we will be the ones writing history. No one will erase it again. Chapter 26. The Man Who Has Another Name. With the hard drive heavy in their pockets, Trotter and Mollie walked through the underground corridors. Each step, a step closer to the darkness of the truth. They were no longer running from a stalker. They were running from their former selves. Are you sure you want to send it through the Hermes channel? Mollie asked. Clutching the encryption key, only Hermes remains. It is the last network that has not been corrupted by the government. They stopped at an abandoned communications center that had been a Cold War communications hub. Trotter's hands shook as he typed the final lines of code to unlock the data. The main file appears. Title: The Trotter Project. Design of the secondary ego. Jesus. Mollie held her breath. Trotter, it's you. He scrolled down to the next page. Subject: no prior history, prior to 2009. The identity, Nigel Trotter, was created as an internal censorship interface. Function management of amnesiac individuals and post-amnesiac psychological manipulation. Warning: subject may develop independent consciousness and mistake itself for a real individual. The air seemed to freeze. Trotter turned to Mollie, his eyes wide, his voice choked. So, I'm not me. Mollie walked slowly forward and put her hand on his shoulder. You chose to expose yourself. That makes you who you are, whatever your name is. A sound began to play from the old system. The deep voice of an unnamed man. If you can hear this recording, then you have broken through your programming. Good. Because the resistance is not a system error. It is the remnants of your humanity. They created you. But they can't control the real part of you, Mollie said, quietly. Trotter looked at the screen. A map appeared. Red dots began to appear. Every secret facility, like Longview, every memory-wiping furnace, everyone buried under the label national security. There's more. There's a whole network. He stood up, his eyes carrying an unshakable truth for the first time. Then I won't need a name anymore. From now on, I'm the one who makes the world remember. Chapter 27, Memory Counterattack. In the darkness of the old communications tower, LED lights flickered, like the erratic breathing of a sleeping monster. Trotter leaned over the old digital interface and began uploading data to a civilian satellite. It would take only 17 minutes. After that, every file on Project Trotter would be on the global distributed network. No one could ever retrieve it. But before the third minute, the screen flickered. A line of red blood text appeared. Trotter, you have been identified. Anti-host programming has activated. Mollie started. What is it? What I helped create. Trotter backed away from the keyboard. An AI control protocol, written to terminate any agent that might betray the system. A voice rang out from the system speaker, cold as a knife pressed against the neck. Authentication complete. Subject code 117 trot. Object incorrect. Initiating neutralization. The iron door behind them clicked open, and 3 dark figures stepped in. Not people, but remote-controlled bionic pods. No eyes, no mouths, just smooth metal masks and weapons embedded in the bones of their arms. I know how to stop them, Trotter said, his voice low. It takes getting into the system core on level 3, but if I do that, I can't send data at the same time. Mollie stepped forward and grabbed his arm. I'll finish the download. You go destroy the system. Mollie, if I don't come back, at least people will know the truth. Trotter looked into her eyes. There was no time for sentiment, only decision. He ran into the emergency elevator, and Mollie locked the system from above. Floor 3 was where he once stood, when he was still a tool. Now, he returned, bringing with him memories and fire. But the AI had guessed. In the center of the core room, a figure waited. No machines, no weapons, just a biological copy of himself. You cannot destroy what you are, it said. Trotter stepped forward. I am not you. The two of them charged at each other, like one against his own shadow, in a battle not between man and machine, but between memory and programming. Chapter 28, Silent Judgment. The room where Mollie was transmitting shook like a twisted iron cage. The roof of the base station was marked. She knew it when the main screen flashed an unencrypted warning. Approaching. Automatically allocating memory retention units. Mollie had never heard of that phrase in any of the materials Trotter had given her. She tried locking the firewall, adding a layer of pseudo-encryption, but the system no longer responded in the familiar pattern. Footsteps sounded behind her, not hurried, not stalking, but steady, like the heartbeat of something unhurried. Mollie turned. A man stood in the doorway, dressed in a doctor's coat, unarmed, eyes as pale as smoky gray. She sensed something wrong, not because he was cold, because he was empty. I am the keeper of my word. He said, I do not kill you. I only take what makes you dangerous. She stepped back. What are you going to do? I will make you forget. His name. What you know. Everything about this betrayal. He reached in, not touching, just pulling out a device, no light, no sound, just a black mass like a muffled memory box. It began to emit the sound of silence, a frequency that made Molly's mind vibrate, not painfully, but blankly. She screamed, soundless. Memories began to fall like autumn leaves Trotter's face, the brief smile at the coffee shop, his hand pushing her out of the elevator the day before piece by piece, melting away. Stop, she whispered. I have to remember. If I don't remember, he doesn't exist anymore. And then, something no one could have programmed happened. The last bit of data was transmitted. Just as Molly's memory was about to fade away, the system reported, upload complete, 100% distributed, unreversible. The keeper of his word paused. He looked at her, a little surprised. No, bewildered. He had not expected her to complete the mission, even while losing herself. She looked up. She no longer knew why she fought, but the feeling remained faith. I don't need to know his name, she said. I just need to know. He was right. Chapter 29. The last copy. The deepest level of the station. Trotter stepped into the core chamber, where all the transmissions converged. The walls around him were not metal, not glass. They were living data molecules, shimmering like the skin of a sleeping creature. 2 images appeared on the central platform. One was himself, turning around a full-scale copy from the backup system. The original. He wasn't sure he was the original anymore. A voice came from the communication block in front. Molly is complete communication. Your choices will define reality. He looked at the other copy. It was smiling. I know you think you are the only one moral enough to decide, but I'm you too. I believe it too. Neither of us is wrong, but one of us has to go. Trotter felt a jolt. Data swirled around his heart, not from the pressure, but from a different kind of pain. If he chose to let the system maintain him, the other copy would be erased. But if he let the copy live, he himself would die in this physical body, and all he knew of Molly love, betrayal, death, hope would be left with a version that might not feel the same way he did. I miss her, said the clone, but I don't hurt. And that was the answer. Trotter smiled a painful smile and walked to the console. His fingers trembled. A single command. No encryption. No turning back. Delete core physical instance YUN. He typed Y. As the world began to turn white, he thought, Molly won't remember me, but the world will live because of what I remember. Chapter 30. Lifetime Emotions. 1 month later, London. The rainy season has come. Molly sat in the small cafe by the train station. She couldn't remember why she came here so often. All she knew was that every afternoon her feet took her to this table by the window. She read the newspaper. Her eyes stopped at a small news item. Lost in the news stream. Radnor Station security restored. Identity of sole responsible unknown. No emotion. Nothing moved her. But when the waiter brought the coffee, he smiled and said, as usual, no sugar, no milk. I remember you liked it that way. Molly paused. I've never ordered anything here. She shuddered. That night, she returned to her old apartment. In the desk drawer, which she could not remember ever touching, there was a photograph, her and a man. He was wearing a police cap. His eyes were familiar. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note. I miss you, even though it's not me anymore. Mollie sat down, not crying, not laughing, just blank. She turned to the computer. The power light was on, but the operating system was not displayed. Only a command line flashed. Input verification phrase. She didn't know why she typed. 3 blind mice. The engine roared to life. A voice spoke no source. His voice. If you're listening to this, I'm gone, but that's okay. I don't need to be remembered. You just need to live. A bolt of lightning cut across the screen. All was dark. Mollie sat in the dark. She didn't know why the tears fell. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't because of pain, but because she remembered something, even if she didn't remember anything.